In today's tier list, I'll be ranking all 137 Lance units from S all the way down to Don't, based on how well they can use Rearmed Ingrid's new Arcane Luin. This tier list will be a bit different than other tier lists because I will not be ranking the units based off their power or how good they are, but based off how well they use this weapon. As this tier list has a massive amount of units, I will be breaking down all the units into movement types to make it easier to digest the information. You can find timestamps in the description down below if you want to find a particular unit you care about. Now let's quickly go over the criteria I use to rank these heroes. First is if the unit has access to preference skills. For example, a hero like Flame Lin with Verdict of Decay. Heroes that have preference skills cannot equip their preference skill and this weapon, so it has less value on these units. Second, stat line. When you're looking at inheritable weapons, stat lines become a much bigger determining factor. Third, movement type. Different movement types have different skill availability, such as infantry heroes having access to times pulls. Last but most importantly, if you have a favorite unit you love, use it on them. Playing with your favorites is the most important factor. Screw the tier list, favorites are greater than meta. Let's quickly break down all the effects of Arcane Luin and discuss what they mean and who can take full advantage of them. The first effect is the same as always, Slay. This just lowers our cooldown by 1, making specials more consistent. Our second effect is plus $5 stats if the unit's HP is greater than or equal to 25%. Your typical effect. But now we get to the interesting effects. 20% true damage based off the unit's speed. This is a massive damage boost and it also works with AoE specials, which is a really big deal, which we'll discuss in a little bit. Then we have low speed defense, another really good effect as it makes it much easier to win speed checks because the foe cannot have access to visible buffs to their speed. This also means they cannot rely on bonus doubler or other visible stat effects to stack speed. Then the final effect is full no follow-up, but it is speed based. No follow-up is one of the most important effects in the game as of now, as it not only allows the hero to be better at securing kills with follow-up attacks, but also survive in combat as it can stop the opponent from doubling you. Now the first thing we have to talk about is that speed is king. Speed is by far the most important stat for anyone using this weapon. Speed is going to increase your damage, speed is going to allow you to double, and also deny the opponent's double. It is necessary for this weapon. Do not put this on a slow hero, it will do absolutely nothing for them. Arcane Luin is one of, if not the most specific arcane weapon we've gotten. This is a very specialized weapon for speedy lance units. So okay, let's go over the different movement types and the advantages and disadvantages this weapon offers for each. First up is Infantry. Now Infantry have the best inheritable skills in the game. They get access to Times Pulse, Special Spiral 4, and even Tempo. All these effects are going to allow Infantry units to do a great job of spamming specials, which is very relevant here, because the most powerful way to use this weapon is going to be AoE builds. The reason for this is because the true damage affects AoEs as well. This means that you are essentially doubling the true damage you get from 20% to 40%. This is due to the fact that when the AoE special goes off before combat, it gains 20% true damage. Then immediately after, your hero attacks, which also deals another 20% true damage. With the correct build, this shreds most units and kills them. We've already seen how ridiculous this can be on units like Arcane Luin or Legendary Yuri. Now while this is a massive upside for infantry units, there is a downside as well, and that is that infantry units have pretty easy access to no follow-up already. So having it built into their weapon isn't such a big deal. On the other hand though, this weapon is amazing for Cavalry and Fliers because they don't have easy access to no follow-up. The only real options they have are Arcane Luin, Fallen Lilith, or Legendary Battles to Drive effect. They can get offensive no follow-up through the flow skills, but it's only in player phase. This weapon, giving it to them all the time, will drastically increase the reliability of them being able to double and deny doubles. Now unfortunately when it comes to armors, I don't think this weapon is very good. The only hero I can think of that can take advantage of it at all is Christmas Hilda. This weapon already has some overlap with Hardy Fighter, which grants defensive no follow-up, and with Savage Fighter, which gives full no follow-up. I honestly think that Arcane Qiang is better for the most part for armors, but we'll discuss that later in the armor section. Speaking of Arcane Qiang, let's quickly talk about the differences between the two arcane lances. Now this is the first time we've gotten to the same weapon type for arcane weapons. I imagine this won't be the last time. Now when it comes to the differences, you are essentially trading full no follow-up on the Arcane Luin for a guaranteed follow-up attack and follow-up denial with Arcane Qiang. And then you're also trading true damage and a lull for special acceleration. I do think Arcane Luin is the better of the two weapons, but that doesn't mean it's the best for every hero or playstyle. Slower lance units are definitely going to prefer Arcane Qiang, and also heroes who want to spam bigger specials. This is especially true for heroes who need to recharge specials, like in the case of Hardy Fighter builds. If you're trying to decide which Arcane Lance is better for your hero, then the biggest determining factor will be speed and build. You can also check out my Arcane Qiang tier list if you want to see some builds for that weapon in particular. Now with all that out of the way, let's jump into the infantry tier list. There is going to be a pattern you're going to notice with all of these tier lists. Speed is king. The faster heroes are at the top of the tier list, while the slow units are at the bottom. Now at the bottom of the tier list, we have all our powerful lance heroes who either have really good preference weapons or preference skills, and are better off running those. The lance units in S tier are all very quick and really can capitalize on the power Arcane Luin provides due to their very good speed stats. Now when it comes to builds, there are quite a few options and you can easily replace some skills with alternatives, especially when it comes to the A slot. First up, let's show off the AoE build on Navarre. This build is best used on infantry as they will have the easiest time charging the AoE special. They can make use of Times Pulse and then cooldown supports like Asker, Duo Crom, or Duo Alphonse, or even run the Quick Impulse Seal if necessary. This build can do a ton of damage, and Special Spiral 4 can keep it going turn after turn, while also providing an additional 5 true damage every time it procs. Our second build is your typical frontline Final Astra build. This build could also be used alongside a Farsaver or even in my Myriad season in SD. This build will give you a nice chunk of damage reduction thanks to Final Astra and Close Call 4, while Attack Speed Finish gives you that true damage you need and also some extra healing to keep your hero healthy. You can even switch out Times Pulse for Speed Smoke 4 if you want, if you have a cooldown support to help you pre-charge your special. The third build is a godlike reflexes build you would use on an Omni tank. This build will require some cooldown support to get it going, but it will allow the hero to retaliate and destroy threats while also having a nice chunk of unpierceable damage reduction. The next two builds are some fun damaging builds. First up is a cool Special Spiral 4 build on Ana. This build gives Ana adaptive damage, damage reduction piercing, and at the same time gives her damage reduction because Vile Astra will always be charged. It doubles down on the speed investment, 20% true damage from your weapon, and even more speed-based true damage from Vile Astra itself. But if you want a pure player phase build, you can use one like Lucina's. This build allows Lucina to pop off with a big Luna and heal up a ton of health at the same time. Tempo ensures that our special will always go off, even if the opponent has guard. And our final infantry build is going to be a Gale Force build. Now I do think Arcane Qiang is overall better for Gale Forcing due to its special acceleration built in, but you can Gale Force with Arcane Luin with this type of build. With help from Crom or Asker, you can even get your Gale Force down to 2 cooldown, so you can Gale Force even with only 1 hit, which makes it much more consistent. Okay, with that, let's head over to the Cavalry tier list and check out some builds over there. Once again, this tier list is almost completely based off the speed stat. The faster the Cavalry unit is, the better they can make use of this weapon. At the bottom of the tier list are heroes who don't want this weapon because their weapon is already good, or they have preference skills that make them unique. At the top of the tier list, we have Owain, Summer Ash, and notably, Joffrey. Now I know Joffrey does have a good weapon, but I'm going to be honest, Arcane Luin is just better, especially when you consider its speed stat. Cavalry does have a few options for different builds, but most of them are quite offensive. First up, we have the AoE build. This build takes advantage of Arcane Luin's true damage. The problem is though that Cavalry doesn't have an easy way to charge up big specials. So if you do want to use this build, be ready to bring some powerful support like Duo Asker to get this build going. A more typical build you can run is a mixed phase build. This build stacks a ton of speed and lets Owain put out solid damage while also protecting himself with some damage reduction from Speed Smoke 4. The arcane weapon really shines here as it does give you full no follow-up in both phases. You can also do a Gale Force initiating build like the one shown. Once again, you are reliant on Heavy Blade to activate Gale Force, which isn't as consistent. But if you want to run an Omni Tank build on your Cav, then you can use the build shown on Joffrey. This build gives Joffrey most of the effects he will need, such as distant counter, damage reduction, and even guard. Guard 4 is a big skill for this build as it allows Joffrey to have damage reduction even before Speed Smoke 4 activates. The final two builds are 2 player phase builds. Our first build is a pure nuking build that allows Ash to run in, do some big damage, but also stay healthy due to Surge Sparrow. Then the second build is taking advantage of the built-in no follow-up to use the sweep skill. This allows Ash to attack into the opponent without the fear of dying to a counterattack, while also doubling. Feel free to swap over to Water Sweep if you need to deal with some dragons. Let's move on to our Flier tier list. Just like our other tier list, this list is almost completely ranked based off of speed, and just like with our Cavs, Flyers getting access to full no follow-up really bolsters their offensive and defensive power. Let's jump into some builds with our fastest Flyers. Our first build is another AoE build. Once again, you're going to need some cooldown support for this one, but it is very strong. Our second build on Ingrid is going to allow her to completely nuke enemies thanks to Dive Bomb. Before, Flyers had to be scared of follow-up denial, but with Arcane Luin, they can throw that worry away and hit the opponent twice, unleashing Ruptured Sky and dealing 40% speed-based true damage thanks to hitting twice. If you want a more mixed phase build though, you can go with the one on airness. This build allows her to stay mobile with trace and the warping from the O skill, while also being able to pack a punch in both phases. Now if you want to go for a more defensive mixed phase build, then you can take advantage of the new guard bearing 4. Alongside speed mode 4, this can give your flyer a lot of damage reduction in both phases. But if you have a resistance heavy flyer like Flier, the Pegasus Flight 4 can also be a great option, as it gives you a ton more stats from that B slot. Then the final build is our typical Gale Force build if you do want to use the weapon for that type of play. Okay, let's move on to our final tier list, Armors. Now I'm going to be honest with you, Armors do not use this weapon very well. I'd only use it on Hilda if anyone. You can try to speed stack Robin or Eliwood, but in almost every case, you're better off using the other Arcane Lance, as it does give special acceleration, which works really well with Hardy Fire. Now when it comes to builds for Hilda, there aren't many options because you typically won't need a guaranteed follow-up attack thanks to no follow. Our first build is a near save build that makes use of Special Fire 4 to spam out big specials and get some healing. This build is less resilient than your typical Hardy Fighter near save build, but it can do more damage. Our second near save build is a Hardy Fighter build. This build does have some overlap as you will get defensive no follow-up from your weapon and Hardy Fighter, which isn't great. And on top of that, you'll also need a special or accelerating support like Thor, Brave Lucina, or Na to ensure that your defensive special can properly recharge after every combat. And then our final build is a far save build making use of the new Armored Bacon special. This build has a bit of everything. You get non-pierceable damage reduction thanks to Armored Bacon, special acceleration, and guard due to Special Fire 4, and even some healing. This build can be quite powerful, but once again, it is not as resilient as just a straight up Hardy Fighter build. And with that, my Arcane Luin tier list is complete. All 137 Lance heroes ranked from S to Don't. I hope this video helped you out with your choice of who to give Arcane Luin to, and maybe even showed you some cool builds to use. Just remember, give this weapon to your favorite hero, but also make sure they are fast. Also, make sure to drop a comment down below letting me know who you plan to give Arcane Luin to, and once again, I'd like to thank all my members for their constant support. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and make sure to summon Felix. This has been Oblivion, catch you later.